Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Ruffman. I am your host, John Ruffman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps our podcast to expand and grow, which is, of course, our goal. We have much to touch on this morning, but I must begin with the demolition and construction going on at the White House. I do so because I'm very upset. When Donald Trump proposed building a ballroom in the area where the First Lady's headquarters is, the East Wing of the White House, he promised there would be no demolition, no destruction of the existing structure. That is clearly not true. And then his press secretary had the audacity to misconstrue construction at the White House, saying it began in the Eisenhower administration. Not true. It began in the Truman administration because the timbers in the old White House were rotting. And if you read Mr. President, edited by William Hillman, you hear the whole story of how Truman ordered the construction, including the Truman balcony. And I must tell you, the assault on the integrity of the White House is absolutely appalling. And then the president had the audacity to say he was paying for it, but he isn't. He may be contributing, but he has assembled contributors who are going to make massive contributions to do what, frankly, should not be done at the White House. And may I point out, this was done arbitrarily. Truman went through a whole historical commission. He made sure that everything that was done was proper, but not Donald Trump. And did you hear him yesterday putting his hand to his ear and saying how wonderful the sound of construction is? This is really an assault on an American icon, the White House. And I'm very upset, and I realize there is nothing we can do now, and maybe there was nothing we could do before. But can you imagine the President of the United States who promised, who gave his word that the integrity of the building would not be affected? Well, it goes to show you what Donald Trump's word is worth. Nothing. Now, I want to move to a second very critical topic, and that has to do with Ukraine. You all know that Donald Trump promised that there would be a summit with Vladimir Putin to talk about Ukraine. Frankly, I never held much hope for the so-called Budapest meeting, but now you know it's not happening. Donald Trump was unable to deliver on a discussion with Putin because Putin has laid down what he wants. And in turn, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is very unhappy because he has laid down what he must have, and the two are in conflict. It means that Donald Trump's efforts to try to bring an end to the Ukraine situation, well, doesn't seem to be working. And by the way, speaking of the Middle East, where Donald Trump claimed another major accomplishment, the only thing that has been accomplished is the release of the hostages. You all know that peace in the Middle East is virtually impossible. And as I discussed with you yesterday, Hamas is now committing mass executions against people who either collaborated with Israel, in their mind, or who have been traitors to the Palestinian cause. It is appalling. And have you heard any outrage? No. Donald Trump repeated that if Hamas does not disarm, he will destroy Hamas. Well, let me tell you, Hamas is not going to disarm. We all knew that Hamas would not disarm, and we understand that Hamas is determined to hold on to Gaza. This is something that is incomprehensible to me, that Donald Trump is given a pass because it's not a peace agreement. And more than that, let's be clear, Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement about the alliance between Israel and the United States. And he said that we are separate and distinct. And very much like Menachem Begin, who way back when said, we are not a vassal state, we are not a banana republic, Netanyahu is maintaining that same position. And that, my friends, is a good thing. And let's talk about the deadlock in Congress. There is a clear reason why the Speaker of the House of Representatives Mr. Johnson is not calling the House back into session. And that has to do with the whole case dealing with Epstein and the fact that if Congress is reconvened, if the House is reconvened, there will be 218 votes to bring the question to the floor. And that's something that evidently Speaker Johnson and Donald Trump absolutely oppose. Let's be clear. We need to know what happened. We need to know whether the President of the United States did things which he should not have done. These are serious moments. And now that we know that he is softening his stand on Elaine Maxwell and even talking about perhaps granting her a pardon, I think everyone's antennas should be up and everybody should be deeply, deeply concerned. A quick word about the race for mayor of New York. It appears that Mondami is going to win the election, and it appears we will then have a Democratic Socialist as mayor of New York. Let me be crystal clear. Mondami is not a communist. He is a Democratic Socialist. He won the Democratic nomination in the primary, and although I personally would never vote for him because of stands that he takes with which I profoundly disagree, the idea that there is now an effort to portray the Democratic Party as made up of communists and socialists, and we heard that last weekend when, during the No King protest, Donald Trump and the Republicans considered the Democrats to be either communists or socialists. And there is more. The president is now indicating that military action against Venezuela may be necessary, and he's also stepping up his reaction to Colombia. Let me point out, and I've done it before and I will do it again, that the president has great power, great latitude when it comes to a declaration of war. But indeed, he doesn't need a declaration of war. All the president has to do is order our troops into action, and that is precisely what will happen. This is a serious moment in terms of American foreign policy on so many levels. The final question that I would pose to you today is, when will the courts begin acting on the question of presidential authority? The Supreme Court has a number of cases before it which are critical. We've discussed this often in the past, and I raise it again. We wait to hear what the Supreme Court will or will not do when it comes to presidential power and Donald Trump. I began with my concern about the destruction of the East Wing of the White House. Many of you know I have a rather massive library, and one of the books in my library is the White House Guide, signed, I would point out, by 3 presidents and 7 first ladies. It's really quite a remarkable historical document. The idea of what's happening in the White House today is appalling to me. But may I say, it is simply an indication of what I believe sincerely is an abuse of power on so many levels by Donald Trump. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which of course is our goal. You can communicate with me by LinkedIn, by Facebook, or by my direct email. And may I say, even those of you who disagree with me, I welcome your comments. And to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast, thanks, Gogo, for everything you do every day. I am John Rothman. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.